Hi, I'm Dan Gilbert in the psychology department at Harvard University. And one of the things that I have studied for pretty much the last 3 decades is how people make predictions about what will make them happy, how happy it'll make them, and how long that happiness will last. As you might expect, they don't always do a good job of it, which gives me a job to do.
Welcome, Dan.
Hey, thanks for having me.
We're very excited because you're going to tell us why people care so much about the future. And I just want to tell you a story first. So I just came from a lunch over at the Radcliffe Institute, and I was a fellow there a couple of years ago. And I gave a talk about the early phases of this PredictionX project. And I was trying to explain this, which we'll talk about later, which is a cycle of making a prediction and then taking some observations and then checking how your prediction came out and then, going back and maybe make your system better. And the Radcliffe Fellows are a mixture of poets and historians and scientists and psychologists and all kinds of things. And two of them over this lunch after my talk, which is officially to discuss the talk, said to me, "I'm really curious, why are you so obsessed with accuracy?" And I said, the scientist in me went, why wouldn't I be, right? But then, I thought about it, and I thought back to something we had also done at Radcliffe, which is one of the undergraduate research partners we had there was an expert in Turkish coffee ground divination, tasseography, okay? And we did this on camera. You can see it in the class, okay? It was really fun. And, he's looking at the coffee grounds, and he's telling me all these things. And then he says, this prediction expires in 40 days. And I said, why? What? And he said, because this is a social activity in the countries where it's done, and people just want to talk about the future.
Right.
They don't actually care so much about what's going to happen. So my first question to you is, where are most people on this spectrum of I just want to think about the future? Why do I want to think of this? This is a very open-ended question. Why do I want to think about the future? How accurate does a prediction, or does my prediction, or does somebody else's prediction have to be about the future? Is that going to make me happy, upset? Where are you on this?
It's a good insight that when human beings think about the future, they're not always doing it with an eye towards accurately predicting what will happen.
Right.
Sometimes they're doing it as a social ritual. Sometimes they're doing it because it's fun.
Right.
I mean, who doesn't like to sit and dream about the vacations one might have, or I wonder if she'll say yes when I say this, and a lot of that kind of daydreaming is enjoyable in the present while we're doing it.
Right.
And whether these prognostications actually come to pass is kind of beside the point.
Right.
With that said,
Right.
a large amount of what humans do when they're trying to predict is an attempt to know what will really happen.
Right,
And
to
when
get it
they
right.
get it wrong, they're not happy.
Right. Okay. Well, good. That sort of confirms my original suspicion, but my mind was opened to the idea that people just like to think about the future.
That's not true. Not just. They like to think, but not just.
Right. Exactly. Okay. Although, aren't sometimes they're just thinking about it, or you're saying all the time?
No, sorry. I'm agreeing with you.
Okay.
I'm disagreeing with your friends that that's all people care about.
Oh, right. Yeah.
Some of the time when we think about the future, it's for fun.
Right.
A lot of the time when we're thinking about the future, it's in an attempt to get to the good one and avoid the bad one.
Exactly.
And the accuracy of our predictions determines whether we can do that. So it is paramount.
And when you and I first met, and I told you that we were doing this project about prediction, and we were talking about your happiness research, you basically said that humans are just prediction machines who are walking around trying to predict the future and how to be happy.
Well, it was funny. You said, why should people care about the future? And a little voice in my head said, what else is there to care about?
What else is in your future?
Well, what else is in the world?
Right.
The present, William James made this point.
Yeah.
The present is an infinitesimally small point on a timeline. The past, it's interesting, but there's nothing to be done about it.
Yeah.
So that only leaves the future to care about in some deep sense.
Makes perfect
I think
sense.
they're asking you the wrong question.
And I have to ask you a professional psychology question before we go on. We have made this statement occasionally where we qualify it, where we say humans are the only species that spend all this time thinking about their future. We think. So that we think. Do you know, are there other species that actually sit around thinking about the future a lot?
Well, I made the same mistake you just made, which is in order to be cheeky, I opened a popular book with the claim that human beings are the only species that thinks about the future.
Right.
And of course, that meant for the next decade, I would hear from people who disagreed.
Right.
Some of those people were cranks, but several of them were really smart scientists
Mm-hmm.
who illuminated my landscape by showing me data. demonstrating that there are other species that do things that look remarkably like predicting the future.
Okay.
Now, it doesn't mean that in the head of an animal they are doing what you're doing
Right.
when you go, I wonder what it will be like to eat cheesecake on a surfboard. And you can,
Kayak in the fjord in Norway is the one that
Okay,
I was
that's
thinking
even
about
better.
this morning. It's really happening.
but you can close your eyes and actually create a mental simulation of
Yes.
that. And from the experience of simulating, you can come back to the moment and go, oh, that would be fun. Or actually, it would be kind of cold and wet.
Right.
I'm still convinced no other species does that.
Okay.
Now, has nature evolved brains that are capable of making animals behave in ways that are anticipations of the future? Yes, and probably the most stunning data are not on, you might have thought it was dolphins or chimpanzees.
Some kind of primates, yeah.
It's not. It's corvids. It's ravens and crows. And they do things that look remarkably like plotting about the future. For example, there's great work coming out of Cambridge University showing that corvids often will cache food. You know, they hide it for later. And the experimenters can change the parameters of when later will happen and what will be happening. And the corvids act as though their caching behavior
Yeah.
is such that they're acting as though they understand that later the food will be moved, or later the food will be unavailable, or later the food will only be available at a certain time. It changes their behavior in the present. Now,
Is that because they've seen it change in the past?
Yes, they've been taught.
Okay.
So there's no, they're not just so smart they figured out what the experimenter is going to do. But
point.
isn't it rather amazing that having been taught what will happen later, they now can base their current behavior on it? So some people believe this is evidence that these birds are actually, in some sense, thinking about, mentally representing a time that has not yet come.
Yeah.
So I think the answer is probably maybe some other animals can think about the future, but no other animal thinks about it like we do or as far into the future as we do. No other animal is thinking about its retirement 30 years later.
And that gets to this other question about how if you're thinking about the future and about the past, and you're using your whatever faculties, whether we call it imagination or something else, but to think about the past, how does that affect your imagining of the future? So there's those birds are basing some their predictions in the future on some past experience, right?
Well, of
So how
course,
do you
our
connect?
simulations of the future, we build these representations from a brick and mortar called the past. When I ask you, what do you think it'll be like to take a vacation on the beach at Kauai?
Yeah.
You take all the information you have from the past about beaches, about Hawaii, about laying prone, and you build a simulation. So it's not remarkable that the
Right.
material we use
Right.
to build future representations is past representations.
Right.
What's interesting is that people don't always do this in the most rational way. Oftentimes, they will take extremely unrepresentative instances from the past
Special selection.
and use them to simulate
Yes.
the future. And therefore, their simulations turn out to be wrong.
This is we don't know how happy something will actually make us.
Sometimes that's the case.
Yeah. It brings me to my next thought, which is really long-term future. And so let me just tell you a little backstory that I don't know if you've seen in the prediction materials, but we have an interview with this guy named James Leonard, who's a performance artist who has degrees in anthropology and then became a performance artist and is friends with Jason Orr here in the anthropology department. And that's how we met him. And he made a climate change divination tent. I'll let you watch the video to figure out what this means. But his goal, was to bring people in parks and museums and stuff where he exhibits this thing into a tent with paintings of all kinds of symbols from different cultures, predictive traditions, and then read tarot cards in the tent, all while trying to get them to think about climate change, which there's some signs outside that say that this is about climate change. And maybe he asks them questions, but he sort of leads them. And this sounds a little weird, But I interviewed him afterwards and said, can you explain to me, why and how this works? And he said that a lot of times people know a lot about their own future that they just don't want to think about. And that it's a form of prediction to just get people in a space and in a mindset where they will actually acknowledge what they really know about the future, but they won't think about it. And so a lot of people look at climate change and they say, oh, that's in my distant future. That's not really my future. Or I don't mean that they deny it in the way that they deny that the science is true, but they deny that it's an important problem for them. And I remember going to a talk once by Arthur Kleinman, who said that humans exist because they have an appropriate level of denial, and that people who have, too much fear about certain things can't even function in everyday life. So what is that sort of appropriate level of denial of the future for people, and how do you reconcile, people worrying about their retirement 30 years from now, but then hearing that the world is going to be 5 degrees hotter and a disaster 30 years from now and not worrying about that?
Well, I think there's a fundamental distinction between making a prediction and then using it.
Okay.
Right? I mean, there are systems for prognosticating, for figuring out what's likely to happen.
Right.
And then there's the question of how do we act on those predictions? I think most people with regard to climate change absolutely believe the predictions that bad things are coming. But what they understand is that there is a confidence interval around that prediction, as there is with all predictions.
Right.
When the weatherman tells them it's going to rain today, they understand that means almost surely, but they wouldn't be startled if it didn't happen.
Right.
And I think it's not denial. I don't think people are going, the prediction isn't true.
Right.
What they're saying is there's some uncertainty in it. And in that little circle of uncertainty, good things are likely to happen. So, scientists will think of something, right? We'll all go to Mars, or they'll find some kind of pill to put in the water and it'll absorb all the carbon. And I shouldn't stop burning fossil fuels and using the light bulbs I like now when there's uncertainty around the prediction. It's the inherent uncertainty of prediction that allows people to sometimes reasonably and sometimes unreasonably not act on predictions.
So this grin on my face is because this course, the whole project, was almost called Uncertainty. And the original motivation, you were asking how this all started, when I was saying to the friends at GBH that prediction was so important and that simulation was so important, it was specifically because when the public hears that there's uncertainty associated with climate change prediction, the most extreme form of what you just said is to go, that means they don't know anything.
Right.
In other words, to make the uncertainty error bar, as big as possible and just go, I don't even have to worry about that.
Right.
And so the whole underlying motivation of this project is to get people to understand that uncertainty can be quantified and that they have to think about things in that probabilistic way, which is not a natural way as far as I understand.
No. Human beings have two categories, maybe three. One is definitely.
Yeah.
When a rock is hurtling towards your face, you don't go, there's a small uncertainty. You go, it's going to hit me.
The wind might save me.
Probability 1.
Right.
And then they have might or might not, the world of uncertainty.
Right.
They probably divide that into probably will and probably won't.
Right.
But the difference for most people, I mean, psychologists show this all the time, the difference for most people between 2% likelihood and a 0% likelihood, for most human beings, that's night and day.
Right.
The difference between 2 and 22 is nothing.
Right.
Now, for you and me as scientists, we go, no, the first difference is 2 and the second is 20. Those are numbers. But for ordinary people, the difference between a sure thing and maybe is night and day.
Right. And I remember some stories in your book about experiments where there are weird outcomes.
Yes.
Can you remind me of one of those?
Well, experiments with weird outcomes would be all 300
No.
pages.
Experiments with weird outcomes having to do with uncertainty.
Well, for example, in cognitive psychology, there's a phenomenon called the sure thing principle. People you're a rational wagerer, and therefore if I made you a series of monetary bets with different probabilities, I would flip coin or roll die, you would compute the utility. You'd compute the probability that you'd get your outcome times the goodness of the outcome for you.
Right.
But if I were to ask most people, would you rather have $1 million for sure or a 90% chance of $1 billion? Now, you do math. You'd go 90% chance of $1 billion.
Right.
That's a much better expected utility.
Right.
Virtually no one on earth would take that. They go, oh, give me the sure thing.
Right.
Because the world of for sure
Right.
is very different than the world of maybe.
Well, I think that's why people keep using their old light bulbs, and keep acting as if climate change is going to happen. And what's interesting is that we interviewed also Dan Kamen. I don't know if you know him, but So Dan, we were trying to talk to him about energy solutions and climate change mitigation, and he and I, we were graduate students together, so we know each other for a long time. And so we were having a very frank conversation. And a lot of times people go back to, say, historical examples like Malthus, okay? And so Malthus says the whole world is going to starve because if you just do the math and the population is expanding and here's how much food we can make and everybody's going to starve. And so that's a sort of, prior experience if you want to look at climate change, right? A precedent is the word I'm looking for. And what happened, as you probably know, is nitrogen fertilizer was invented and suddenly we can make much more food. So I think a lot of people, that's the scientists will figure something out, right?
Yeah.
Think that there's some nitrogen fertilizer for climate change on the horizon. And that would be nice,
Yeah.
but we have no idea if
And
that's going to happen.
Actually, we do have an idea. We know it's very unlikely.
We know it's very unlikely,
And so,
right? I shouldn't say we have no idea. Now I'm
But
falling
listen,
into exactly
people
that trap.
are capable of preparing for uncertain bad things in the future. How many
Yeah.
people who live on the coast have storm shutters or flood insurance?
Right.
Now, they understand that the likelihood of these bad things happening to them is not 1. In fact, it might even be less than 50%.
But it's enough.
But they believe they should be Boy Scouts and be prepared.
Yeah.
We have to find a way to get people to feel that way about climate change, to be able to say, look, maybe the worst predictions aren't going to come true, but there's a decent chance they will, so we should take precautions now because by the time they start coming true, it's too
late.
damn late.
It's possibly too late right now, but yes,
It might be too
which is
late
also
right
the
now.
other, that's the fatalist just kind of give up scenario, but I don't want to go there.
No.
I believe that I've also read you and others have said that humans seek to reduce uncertainty in their own lives and that uncertainty makes people worry. And so if we could somehow communicate that climate change simulation has gotten better in some way, and which it has, and that the uncertainty is reduced, I have found, in other words, when we first started this project, I naively thought that something like that would be helpful. We've also interviewed Gina McCarthy, okay, who was the former head of the EPA, for anybody who doesn't know that, and she is all about policy, and she actually said to me, oh, no. We just all believe the scientists, and pretty much everybody believes the scientists, and this is purely a socio-political problem. This is not a science problem anymore. And so where are you on this? We must explain to people so that they can make their own decisions that we've gotten more and more sure about this and that the answer hasn't changed versus it's all about policy and we just have to make rules that are good for people and believe the science.
Yes, those things. Because I don't think they're mutually exclusive. Look, most people don't know what to believe about science.
Okay.
They have fairly high trust in scientists, but telling them our climate models have gotten 27% more accurate,
Yeah.
it's just falling on deaf ears.
Okay.
That's not how you change people's
Right.
behavior.
Right.
The way you change people's behavior is by showing them that other people have already changed their behavior. Human beings follow
Europe,
norms.
for example.
Europe.
Yes. Europe has changed their behavior very well in the climate
Well,
department
so have we.
compared to the
So have we.
a little bit.
The most conservative people you know,
Yeah.
the staunch Republicans recycle. They have a blue bin.
That's true.
They didn't have the most liberal people in the world didn't have a blue bin
That's
25
true.
years ago.
That's
Why do you have
true.
a blue bin? Because the city gives us and everybody does the blue bin. This is how you change human behavior. Human beings we are herd animals.
Yeah,
That's
yeah.
how we have
Okay.
gotten dominion
Okay.
over this planet
Okay.
by being the most social species
Right.
on the planet. And the way you change behavior is that people look around and they go, what he's doing, what she's doing, that's what I will do. So appealing to them through, I don't want to say through reason, but through statistics is almost surely
It's only going
a
to work for
sucker's game.
scientists.
It's going to work for scientists, and they're
Yeah.
already convinced.
Right.
So you have to figure out what is it you really want people to do. We already know from decades of research on persuasion that just scaring people doesn't help. They just get scared.
Right.
Right? The world's going to go to hell. Everything's going to burn up. The oceans are going to dry.
Right.
And then you go, But you haven't told them what they should do. What is the particular action they should take
Right.
tomorrow?
Right.
So the first thing we have to do is figure out what's the particular action we want you, Alyssa, to take tomorrow.
Right.
And then it won't be all that hard to figure out how to make you take it.
And that probably has been true forever. In other words, for as long as there have been people, which actually brings me to my next question. So there's two more people who are involved in this effort who are fascinating, who hopefully will debate each other next year. One of them is Emma Dench, who you probably know, who's our expert on Roman and Greek, ancient Roman and ancient Greek history. And then the other one is Irving Finkel, who I'm not sure you know. Do you know who he is? So he is a curator. He's the head curator of Mesopotamian tablets at the British Museum. And you say, what does this have to do with anything? The answer is, I, because of this class, became somewhat obsessed with cuneiform, because cuneiform is what's used to write all of these beautiful tablets that make all of these predictions in ancient Babylonia, including for haruspicy. We have an expert on that too, Peter Steinkeller, who we interviewed about sheep liver divination. Okay, and in even just sheep liver divination, it evolved over thousands of years to be more and more accurate. And one of the ways that they got it to be more accurate was by having two sheep sacrificed separately in different rooms with two priests reading the entrails and trying to compare what the two priests said.
Law of large numbers.
Yeah, two instead of one. Okay. So anyway, so this ancient Mesopotamian culture just fascinates me. And so I went and visited Irving Finkel in the British Museum just this past December. And I was telling him what Emma said to me. And so Emma said in an interview about ancient Greece, where I asked her whether Aristotle would have believed in the Greek gods. And we were talking about sort of science and religion and whether that's changed over time, the boundary between those, because science as a thing didn't even exist, a millennium ago. And she said that that was a totally ill-posed question, and that, and not in a mean way, okay? But she basically said, it was just in the air, and you didn't have a choice of whether to believe in the Greek. It was just part of society. Like, it would be like asking me if I believe in gravity, okay? When I told Irving Finkel that story, he said, I've read 130,000 Mesopotamian tablets in this museum. Those people were just like us. They made their own choices. There were atheists in ancient Greece. What are you talking about? So the context in which I want to ask where you come down on this is this here. And so this is our sort of, we call it the framework for predictive systems. And we tried to sort of capture all of the systems that we talk about in the project in this one graphic. And so this includes historical things and stuff that's done now. So if you start from the middle, this is your predictive system. So today, this might be a computer simulation. It might be a crystal ball. It might be whatever, okay? Or it might be sheep entrails, a human brain, yes. And it might be sheep entrails, 5,000 years ago. Okay. The point is that there are many different inputs to this. You can either believe somebody has special powers. This is the Oracle of Delphi. You can believe astrology, for example. You can believe throwing dice and sort of making random events, or you can believe that random events have importance. Whatever your inputs are, the question I want to ask you is about this side. So you take whatever this information is, you put it in your system, and then the story that gets told by some historians of science is that this piece is always made where you have a system. It's for making predictions. Of course, you make a prediction. But then if you look at, say, Aristotle and people like that, they went, according to some people, well, that prediction is beautiful. It must be right. And then they didn't say, did it turn out to be true? If not, how should I make my system better? Should I go around and around? And so I have two questions. One is, if this is the human brain, how does this work? And then, do you think that, just your own personal opinion, that was different 5,000 years ago, that people weren't curious to see whether or not their prediction came out right, and that Aristotle really could have gone, good enough, excellent,
Well,
I'll move on.
I'll answer your second question first because
Sure.
It's easy.
Okay.
Despite what my grandchildren think, I
Yeah.
wasn't actually around 5,000 years ago. So, I'm not an expert. And
Right,
I'm not
me
even.
neither.
I'm not a,
That's why we
not
want to
even-
bring these two to have
But
a
I'm not
debate.
even an educated layperson, so I have no opinion about what Aristotle believed.
Okay.
I only know what he wrote.
Okay.
With regard to your first question, I don't believe it. I believe that people may have made predictions that they sat back and admired. Just as when we opened our conversation, we were talking about, the possibility that people just put their arms behind their heads and they think about the future for fun.
Right.
But I think people have always checked the accuracy of predictions.
Right.
I don't believe that 5,000 years ago,
Right.
anybody said, the gods have said, we're going to have a very hot summer.
Right.
And then it was a very cold summer. And
they
nobody
didn't
said,
notice.
don't listen to this schmuck next time.
Right.
That is evaluating accuracy and
Right.
making changes.
Right,
So I
right.
think this loop gets completed all the time for any system.
Right, but
that
you
makes
see, you're sort
predictions.
of answering the second question without necessarily acknowledging it, because if that's human nature, if there is such a thing, how do you really have a society that does stop?
I don't believe it. Maybe sometimes.
Right.
But not most of the time, because even animals do this. Look, this actually is a nice map of what most people think your brain is doing at the millisecond level. I mean, there's whole areas, whole areas of research today about what we call error correction.
Right.
The brain predicting what will happen in the next quarter second,
Right.
then looking out and see if it does happen and changing its model if it made a mistake.
You know what makes me laugh about that? I'm a clumsy athlete. Okay, so like one of these combinations of, I don't ever get hurt doing the daring athletic things. I get hurt walking down the street because I'm an idiot. Okay, but I trip on things and I see that delay, right? Because you're falling or you tripped on something. But you can't make that correction. You can't do anything. It ends.
But the
before you-
correction is to the model.
right. You don't trip.
That
when you
is, as you're
look at the
falling on your
sidewalk.
face, your brain is going, the sidewalk isn't as smooth as we
Next
thought.
time I
Next
should be
time.
more
Exactly right.
Exactly. Oh God. So wait, hang on. I had a couple more questions I want to ask you. Oh, right. Of course. One big question I wanted to ask you. In your writing and your speaking, I've heard you say, right, that memory is about the past, that cognition is about the present, and that imagination is about the future. And I've repeated that to several people I've recommended your book to, and everybody has the same question. Wait a minute, imagination, doesn't that apply to everything? Why is that just the future? It's a good story, but why isn't imagination everything? So now I'm asking you on behalf of all these people, why isn't imagination
Well,
everything?
let's remember that imagination is an English word.
Right.
It means whatever we want it
Right.
to mean. We're standing here in the present on a timeline.
Yes.
In the present, we can look backwards.
Yes.
We can also look forwards, and we can also look out. We need a word to describe those three things.
Okay.
I like the words retrospection, perception, and prospection. I like the words memory, cognition, imagination.
Right.
If you like three different words, fine. We can call them process A, B, and C.
But you think people think about the future differently than they think about the past?
Yes, of course.
Okay.
Why? Because the past is constrained by data.
Right.
The future is.
Sometimes.
Sometimes.
I'm only thinking about our current
No, you're right.
situation.
The past is more constrained by data.
Yeah.
So, one of the great discoveries of 20th and 21st century psychology is that what we think, human beings have memories and they think this is a kind of a video recording of the past. It isn't. It's a story your brain is creating from all the data it has. So we know that you are building a simulation of the past when you remember. But at least that simulation of the past is constrained to some extent by data. I never look back and kind of remember myself as 6 feet tall with blonde hair. It wasn't like that. But I could imagine being that in
I
the
do
future.
wonder, though, whether, in parts of this project, we also talk about technology and how technology has done things like reduce uncertainty. But it's also changed the way that we capture history and, in addition to changing the way we can think about the future. And my daughter is in her third year of psychology and history at St. Andrews. And in history, she had to, because she was doing two majors, she had to take classes out of order. And so her first class, her first year, was about historiography. And her scientist mother went, what is historiography, right? And it's the history of how people have looked at history, is as far as I can understand what it is. And it's kind of this, schools of thought about how to think about history. And the idea that one is interested in an absolutely realistic timeline, a real historian, I'm pretty sure, would say is impossible because there's only people's perception of reality. There's not actual reality. A scientist would definitely object to that statement, but that's the way that people look at history. And I just wonder whether when people have, super accurate digital photographs of what they did look like 40 years ago, so 40 years in the future, are they going to think about that differently than when some, fancy painter came and, shaved off 20 pounds and gave them more hair?
Yeah, I think the degrees of freedom in retrospection are being reduced by our ability to record reality as it happens.
Right.
So it was much easier in 1732 to remember looking a certain way when you were young, feeling a certain way. It was easier to think that people 500 years ago thought a certain way. At present and in the future, it won't be so easy because there will be clearer records.
Right.
But the point in stumbling on happiness isn't that these two systems of looking forward and backwards are fundamentally different. It's actually that they're fundamentally the same.
Okay.
The process of looking into the future and looking to the past is very much the same, except that one of them is partially constrained by facts.
Right.
And the other is only lightly constrained by
Right.
facts.
Right.
But other than that, they're actually very, very similar. imagination is like remembering? Yes, it is.
it is.
Or maybe I should say the surprise is remembering is like imagination? Yes.
That's the
Remembering is
historiography story.
imagining the past
Yeah.
based on all the facts at your disposal.
What's odd though is I don't know if you see this. I mean, now we're going to gossip about undergraduates, but what I see. So we've been doing this as a freshman seminar for 3 years, in part to get ready for this Gen Ed version of prediction, and some of the freshmen, sorry, first year students, have a lot going on in terms of their imagination and what they want to think about the future. But some of them seem to have this phenomenon where everything has been so concrete in their lives, and there's been so much information and so much teaching to a rubric. And, they asked me in the freshman seminar, one kid actually asked me, I asked 2 pages, what are predictions in your everyday life? To just get started, write 2 pages. And tell me how you think about prediction. What's the rubric for grading? It's like, there's no rubric. I actually want to know what you think, okay? And so there's this structuring of education and structuring of their lives that makes me worry that when you talk about imagination and you talk about thinking about the future, the same way they have this super accurate record of the past, they want a super accurate prediction of the future that they can't have, or that would make life less fun. Yeah. And I just don't know. Have you seen this, or is this just me like projecting what I'm worried about?
I don't see a change of that sort among young people. I try to keep in mind that we're dealing, as professors at Harvard, we're dealing with a 0.0001% of a already small age population. Yeah. We have we cannot look at those 12 freshmen we meet and say, this is what young people are like today.
Right.
I don't know. I think the older we get, the more alien they seem to us.
Okay.
And we mistakenly think freshmen are changing. No, you're just getting further and further away from them.
Okay. I still don't think anybody, when I was a student, would have asked what the rubric was for a 2-page paper.
Is it the word they would have asked, not used, or just they wouldn't have asked how it was being graded?
They would have just done it, I think.
Yeah.
I don't know.
All right,
I won't worry. I won't worry. Well, that's just a personal question. Right. So we're almost done with what I wanted to ask you. And so I'm curious what you're curious about in terms of prediction and what I can tell you about other things I've learned about prediction from talking to 20 of our colleagues.
Well, it's so funny. When you ask people about prediction, they're almost always meaning predicting real events in the world.
Mm-hmm.
When we're casting the tea leaves, we want to know if the stock market's going up or down, if we're going to meet a tall, dark, handsome stranger, if the world's going to end in a fiery blast. We want to know what will happen. But my life as a psychologist has suggested to me that that's probably the easier question to answer. What will happen? What's harder to answer is, will I like it or not?
Uh-huh.
And that's kind of a funny thing, because the reason that people make predictions in their personal lives is they want to get to the good future rather than the bad one.
Right.
If I can figure out whether I'll be happier as a lawyer or a carpenter, then I can do one of those things and go into the future that makes me happiest. And what I've been studying for the last 30 years is how wrong we are in our own. If you knew everything that was going to happen to you, every single event that would happen to you in the next 5 years, you still wouldn't know whether they're good or bad. You wouldn't know whether you're going to like them or not.
That's right.
Now people go, wait a minute. If you told me I was going to lose my job, I wouldn't be able to say that was bad. A whole lot of people who lose their job turn around and go, best thing that ever happened to me.
Right.
Oh, wait, if you told me I was going to win the lottery, I wouldn't think that was good. Large numbers of lottery winners go, I rue the day this ever happened to me.
Right.
No, you don't know. And so to me, that's the really interesting mystery of prediction. We think if we could just get these systems to work, God, our lives would be perfect. But in fact, even if you knew exactly what was going to happen, you wouldn't know how much you're going to like the future when you get there. That to me is the interesting part of prediction. The interesting little part that I've been working on.
I'll tell you one thing that's vaguely related to that, is that in the ancient systems, a lot of them are about the idea that the future is already determined and that the supernatural powers, gods or whatever they're called in whatever system, already know that. And there's this wonderful story that David Carrasco tells in one of our interviews about Mesoamerican civilizations, where he says that the gods, it's as if they breathed on a mirror to fog it up for humans so that they couldn't see the future so well. And his justification was that the gods were annoyed that the humans were getting all of the power. But there are other people who have these interpretations about it's not interesting if you can see everything. So we haven't had discussions with those folks about whether people would know whether or not that future would make them happy, but that knowing the future at all wouldn't make them as happy as they thought that it would. And so
What
there's
would
that
be the
kind
point
of
of
tradition.
knowing the future if you can't do anything about it? If you're a determinist and you think the universe is unwinding like a big clock,
Right.
and every single action and thought and feeling I'll ever have is already written in the great book,
Yeah.
and I'm just basically mouthing the lines that have been written for me by the
Right.
author of the universe,
Right.
then why do you need to know how the play ends? Because it ends how it ends. You
Right.
can't change a single line in it, so what's the difference?
That's why I don't understand
I
Calvinism.
don't,
yeah.
I don't think most people, even people who claim to believe that,
Yeah,
I
yeah.
don't think they really believe it.
You
I
should see
think
what
they
happened
think
when
they
we
have an
asked-
effect on the world
Yeah.
and that they can make changes in it.
When we asked the 12 not angry freshmen every year in the seminar that question, and we have them read about Laplace's demon, which of course says that you could predict everything if you just knew enough physics, which isn't true so far. They're freaked out. They're when they actually think about wait a minute, science isn't even totally deterministic. We can't even really make perfect scientific predictions. And then you start saying, well, do you think that your life is determined? And they start thinking about it, and some of them actually do. A couple of each round. They don't really think every moment is, but they think that there's some higher power that has some script that's at least mostly written. And that kind of goes back to the breath on a mirror.
I think that most people are what we might call closet Cartesians.
Mm-hmm.
That is, they do believe in a clockwork universe when it comes to stars and rocks and fossils and plants and the world of stuff. It all happens according to inexorable laws. And they wouldn't even, if you take a rock at the top of the hill and let it roll down, if you knew enough physics, you
Right.
could predict where it would land.
Right.
They carve out an exception, as Rene Descartes did,
Yeah.
for matters of the human mind. Consciousness is exempt from these rules.
Right, right.
There's a thing called free will. There's a thing called a
Right.
spirit. It doesn't obey any of these
Right, right.
rules. So what freaks students out isn't that the laws of physics might explain how a rock rolls down the hill or even what will happen to their bodies. It's that maybe all of their thoughts are determined. Maybe all their desires and emotions are determined, just like a rock falling down a hill. That's scary.
Right. And so is that 21st century neuroscience? In other words, is that what our colleagues who are mapping out the wiring diagram of the human brain and trying to reduce, biology to physics, is that, as a physicist, right, I look at this Laplace's demon thing and I say, okay, this chaos theory, there's quantum mechanics, no. And so as a psychology expert, and I presume you know plenty about neuroscience too, do you look at these neuroscience research projects now that really are trying to see thoughts in the brain and they're trying to map the motion of electrical signals in the brain? The extrapolation of that, is that Laplace's demon of neuroscience?
I don't think so.
Okay.
I mean, I think as we learn more and more about the brain and how it gives rise to this thing we call the mind, I don't think ultimately at the very bottom we find that all things are every action of every neuron was predetermined from the beginning of time. And here's why. We used to think of
Not
uncertainty.
predetermined, but calculable. In other words, could you actually?
Well, calculable if you can calculate the end state from the starting state, and the starting state was the Big Bang,
Maybe that's
it's
predetermined.
determinism.
Okay, yeah.
I guess I would say we used to think of uncertainty as something that bedeviled the observer, right? Your uncertainty about where the rock will land or what a person will do or any physical or mental system is because you don't know enough about it.
Right.
Now, if that's true, then if you do know enough about it, you're Laplace's demon, you can predict everything. What we now know from physics, primarily, is that some systems have inherent uncertainty. It's not an uncertainty that gets reduced by a perfect observer.
No.
They are inherently uncertain. I think a lot of, I shouldn't say what a lot of psychologists believe. My feeling is that's the place where if you are really attached to the notion of free will, that's where you stuff your free will.
Yeah.
You say, even if you knew everything
quantum
about my brain
Yeah.
at moment X, you can't necessarily predict its state at moment X plus one because there's inherent uncertainty. There's nonlinear dynamics. You don't know exactly where it will go. That brings me a certain amount of comfort.
We can preserve free will. Okay, good.
We preserve free will.